Energy production accounts for around 3/4 of global greenhouse gas emissions and around 90% of all carbon dioxide emissions. Are renewable energies the solution to resetting the Earth's temperature, or are they only part of the plan? To talk more about this, I'm joined by Mark DIESENDORF, Honorary Associate Professor at the School of Humanities and Languages at the University of New South Wales. You've found actually that renewable energies won't be able to replace current fossil fuel energy output demands by 2050 if our current global energy consumption continues on the current trajectory. So what do we need to do?
Okay, so that initial statement is rather complicated.
Yes.
So just to try and avoid misunderstanding, the first thing is that renewable energy, together with energy efficiency, can replace all fossil fuels. The problem is timing. We have most of the technologies that we actually need, but the situation now is that as the world recovers from the pandemic, the energy consumption is increasing once more. And so renewable energy is actually chasing a retreating target. Imagine you're running a 100 meters race, and as you approach the finishing line, somebody keeps moving it away. So that's the problem, doing it in time. So coming back to your question now, what can we do? I think we do have to reduce energy consumption in the rich countries. And although this sounds heretically, in fact, it's already happening to a limited degree in the European Union. So countries like Germany and France have been substantially reducing their energy consumption since year 2000. And many of the OECD countries are also doing it, so that if we take the OECD, the rich and medium-rich countries as a whole, since year 2000, they have been only increasing total energy consumption slightly. The problem is individual countries within the OECD, some of them are laggards. And I'm afraid Australia is one of them, the United States is another, and so is Canada. So there is a clear pathway with a combination of energy efficiency and energy conservation and actually changing what we actually use energy for.
Reducing energy consumption seems like a clear answer, you know, in terms of the situation that you've been describing that we're in at the moment, Professor. But from what I understand, the amount of energy consumption needs to be halved. Is that realistic? Can we expect countries, certainly the OECD countries that you've been referring to, can we expect them to actually get this done? Is it possible?
It's scientifically and technologically and economically possible. Politically is another story. So it's a much more difficult challenge to overcome some of the propaganda that we've had from economists and politicians for many years, that the only way to achieve a good life for everyone is to have endless economic growth. Now, unfortunately, on a finite planet, endless economic growth is simply impossible. But it's actually impossible to get economists to understand this. They sort of imagine that the economy is something that lives in isolation from the rest of the planet, and it's something like a god that has to be served. But in fact, the economy is something that we create in society, and we can change the economic structure, we can change the economic system to transition to what we call a steady state economy, an economy that doesn't have eternal growth, but still has prosperity for everyone.
So when you're talking about the fact that it's infinitely possible, but difficult when it comes to politics, what's the first step? I mean, are those first steps already being taken, as you just discussed? There's more and more research being done on this. What is it actually going to take to make this happen, to halve energy consumption in the world's richest countries?
Well, there are both technical and political and social and economic measures that have to be taken. So that's why it's complicated. So for a start, we can't simply stop all growth in economic activity. If we do that and nothing else, people get thrown out of work. So the challenge is to transition the society and the economy to create more work for people while we slow down some of the kinds of economic activity. Not all economic activity is going to slow down. We need to transition very rapidly to renewable energy and to energy efficiency technologies. But we need to reduce some of the energy wasting activities and some of the enormous energy using activities. Now, one has to point out, and there have been a number of studies, that the greatest energy users in the planet are actually rich people. So here's the rub. We have to make it more difficult for rich people to spend money on energy intensive things. Many rich people own multiple houses. They may have private jets. They travel endlessly around the world. So we have to make these things more difficult.
Professor, this is, this in a sense, this is sort of 1 + 1 = 2 type stuff, and that, you have a problem and this is how you solve it. It all seems very straightforward in order to bring us all, into a more, I suppose, equal society, and for many out there, a better life. Over the long term, obviously, you have all of these sustainability benefits and you make the earth a better place to be. So it seems very obvious, but what sort of reaction are you getting when you talk to governments, to politicians, to decision makers about the situation and about the solutions that can be found to the situation that we're currently in?
Well, I think this has to be done step by step. Certainly, if you talk to a politician about slowing economic growth, they will be very upset and they will throw you out of the door immediately. So things have to change rather more slowly, but certainly we can shift a lot of economic activity to the service type activity, the care type activity that is so essential in our society, as we've seen during the pandemic. We need more people, better paid, working in aged care, for example, in childcare, in education. We need more public housing. All these activities spread prosperity in the community and have lower environmental impacts than a vast use of fossil fuels for excessive travel. We can have less travel to work, more work from home, less business travel, more Zoom meetings and meetings like this recording. So there are pathways forward, and some of them involve using different technologies, and some of them involve changing the types of economic activity that we see as important, changing towards the more caring economic activities rather than the most energy consuming and wasting activities.
Professor, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us here on the program today. So thank you so much for joining us. I very much look forward to following up with you again in a few months' time to see where we're at. We'll be following your journey very closely on this research that you're doing. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on your program.
Mark DIESENDORF with us there, Honorary Associate Professor at the School of Humanities and Languages at the University of New South Wales.